Good morning, everybody, or evening or afternoon, because we do record these and stick them out on YouTube's and all the other socials, as it were. Welcome to another episode of CDO Matters Live. I am your host, Malcolm Hawker. I am joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Ben Bourgeois. Ben, how are you this lovely Friday?
I'm good, Malcolm. Good, Malcolm. Happy Friday, and happy Friday before Independence Day holiday here in the U.S.
Indeed.
So looking forward to a long weekend.
Indeed, and we can't overlook our friends to the north. It is Canada Day tomorrow. July 1st is Canada Day. It is their Independence Day. Although their independence was not born of an armed rebellion. It was a bunch of people meeting in a room signing some paper. But as it would usually be in Canada, right? Because it was just politeness and niceness. But yeah, got the 4th coming up on Tuesday and Canada Day tomorrow. For whatever reason, I just overlooked taking a PTO day on Monday. I know you are because you're visiting family, but I didn't do it. And now there's meetings on my calendar. I was like, oh, face plant. There should have been a layup for like a 4-day weekend, and I just didn't do it. I don't know why, but I got meetings on my calendar now. So say a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what do you got going on for the 4th, Ben?
Oh, we are visiting my fiance's family up in New Jersey. So they live up near Newark, and we're going to try to get some time in at the pool and just see family and cook out. I think all the typical 4th of July stuff, nothing too crazy.
We'll take your masks. I've been hearing these Canadian, speaking of Canada, my homeland, I've been hearing of these wildfires that are spreading smoke all over the Northeast. So hopefully the air quality isn't that bad.
Yeah, hopefully so. I was in Boston a few weeks back, and we were thankfully okay. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Well, it'd be kind of weird. I saw photos from before where there was these apocalyptic looking, at sunrise and sunset, where it's orange or these red ball in the sky. It's yee.
Yeah.
Ron, whereabouts? I see Ron coming back. Whereabouts are you, Ron, in the world? Are you somewhere in the Northeast corridor? I would imagine. I've been hearing it was actually even bad, even into Chicago. It was bad. Toronto. Hey, there you go. See the nod to the folks in Canada, Toronto, aka little known fact. One of the names of Toronto, Canada's largest city, at least to people outside Toronto, because growing up in Edmonton, we would call Toronto Big Smoke. I don't know why. But yeah. So the smoke is coming from the big smoke. There's an irony there. So anyway, what do we got on the docket today, Ben?
Well, yeah, I was going to kick things off. You spent much of the last month out on the road. So you were out in San Diego with Dataversity's DGIQ a couple weeks back. You spent an entire week on the road at some Microsoft technology centers doing some keynotes, some networking with some Microsoft orgs. What are some of the themes or things you've been seeing kind of out on the road and with your keynote at DGIQ?
Oh, wow. So a lot. Just first off, the last 2 months, I have been just road warrior. I was in San Diego. I was in Detroit. I was in Atlanta. I was in St. Louis. All over the place, visiting customers, visiting prospects, going to events. It's just fantastic. It is so invigorating and so awesome to be able to go out and meet with people. And I'm not saying that just as this post-COVID thing, and which is awesome too, but I just mean that in general, getting out and talking to people about what's going on, what are you hearing, what are you wrestling with, and so all of that was fantastic. San Diego with DGIQ put on by Dataversity, as always, a fantastic event. If you are a manager of a data and analytics function, or maybe a senior manager of a data and analytics function, or if you're a data steward, or if you are, in a governance committee or heading a governance initiative, if you are the person that is doing data management and getting it done, if you're the person who's responsible for execution of stewardship, of governance, maybe you're MDM, master data manager, maybe you're data quality manager, DGIQ, Dataversity, that's the conference for you, right? The Gartners of the world, great for SVPs and CDOs and C-levels and high-level folks because they're in the clouds and they're talking about strategy level stuff. DGIQ, if you actually do this stuff and you are supporting these programs and defining policies and implementing policies, DGIQ is for you. It's fantastic. So their format is typically it's generally almost a full week, Monday to Thursday. The conference sessions, like the classic conference, is Tuesday, Wednesday, but they'll bookend the conference sessions with professional certifications and workshops. So, I mean, you can actually go and get certified from at least through DAMA, the DAMA, the Data Data and Analytics Management Association, I think is what it called. Anyway, so the professional development opportunities are legit, right? Not just like the palm pressing and the usual. Yeah, the usual kind of conference stuff, but actual learning and development. So it was a great session. It always is. It's so good to go and hang out with birds of a feather, right? Mm-hmm. Right, my data peeps, as it were, and just to talk to people about what are they wrestling with and what's new. And there's certainly a networking community aspect there. Although the biggest takeaway for me, among other takeaways, but the biggest one was first-time attendees. So the morning of the keynote, the opening, the organizer, a gentleman named Tony Shaw, is just a wonderful guy, got in front of the group and asked, how many here for the first time? And out of a room of, my guess is about 250, maybe 300 people, it's a pretty big room, easily 2/3, if not more, put up their hand for first time.
Really?
Yeah. And that was, to me, that's pretty... it's a good, I think it's a really, really good sign. That means we're growing, we're expanding. I'm a little bit concerned that maybe there's turnover happening because a lot of the people coming were from companies that had been there before, but they've got new people.
Right.
I don't know if that's a bad thing. All else being equal, I saw it as being a really, really good thing because we've got new people coming into the space. We've got new companies coming into the space. And that's one of the things that always amazes me as well. It's like, maybe just because I'm old and been doing this stuff a long time, that you would assume that companies have kind of already figured this out and they've already got a data and analytics function, they've got a governance function, they've got an MDM team. You'd think that people had already had this figured out, but no, there's a lot of companies that are just coming to it now.
Yeah, well, hopefully the people who are coming to it, for the same companies years before, they've just progressed in their career. Now they're at the Gartner conferences instead, right?
Well, right. There could be part of that where there's just kind of a natural progression where people that have just joined and in 5 or 10 years from now they'll end up at Gartner. But DGIQ, that was great. And then the other events you mentioned, and I'll stop blabbering for just a bit. I want to say hi to folks. Rob, hi, congratulations on your prophecy certification. That was awesome. I love the LinkedIn post, by the way. I knew it was tongue in cheek, but it was just done so well. And the reason why that post was so well, because you could have walked away from it thinking, was he serious? Was he serious about, the enormity of your accomplishment? So really appreciated that post. That was awesome. Stuart, Henley-on-Thames. My nephew went to school, something on Thames. Oh, I'll scream it out in about 5 minutes. Anyway, Stuart, glad you could join. Who else? Scrolling through. We've got a lot of folks. Oh, South Africa. Wait, that's fantastic.
All the way from Cape
Town. Sitimbiso. I hope I said that correctly. Sitimbiso, or is it a soft th? Sith? Is it sit or sith? Sitimbiso. Hopefully I got it correct. Thank you for joining all the way from South Africa. That's fantastic. Glad you enjoyed that, Rob. Awesome. So cool. Anyway, glad everybody could join. Happy Friday, particularly those are in the UK. Maybe you've got a frosty one in your hand, and by that, for me, that would be probably an adult beverage. Is it too early for that? No, 4 o'clock. It's not too early for that. Well, it's never too early for that.
Cape Town, so
Cape Town. There. Yeah, that's cheapers. That's fantastic. Rowing regatta, Stuart. I'll scream out where my nephew went to school. It is like Oh my gosh. Like one rail stop after Q. Oh, I'll scream it out. Anyway, where I was on the road, and of course, AI. And there was a lot of AI talk because a lot of the events that I was attending in all those other cities that I was talking about, like Detroit, St. Louis, and Atlanta, we were going to events that we were co-sponsoring with Microsoft that was kind of tied loosely to their launch of their fabric. And of course, when you're talking about Microsoft, we were holding these events in Microsoft Technology Centers, their investment in OpenAI, but just writ large, everybody's talking about AI anyway. They were talking about it at Dataversity, they were talking about it at Gartner, and of course, they're talking about it at these events that we were holding with Microsoft. When it comes to AI, I've seen a really interesting pivot over the last 2 months of being on the road, going all the way back to when I was at Gartner in London. Or even IRM in London in early May, I saw this pivot from, I will say, maybe 70% excitement and 30% fear. Mm-hmm. And over the 2 months, I've seen the fear quotient go up, right, and excitement go down. And I think where we are now is like 60% fear, 40% excitement when it comes to AI.
Right.
Yeah, because
a few months ago.
Yeah, because I just think a lot of kind of data folks are, at the beginning, there's just a lot of hype and a lot of excitement. And I think now a lot of data folks are saying, oh my gosh, how are we going to govern this? Right? Like, I'm responsible for data governance. I'm responsible for data access. I'm responsible for, maybe I'm even responsible for things like, like ethics and other aspects of a governance program that a lot of companies are struggling with outside of AI. And then you add the AI piece into it, and I think it's caused
poor governance with this somehow.
Yeah. And like, how do you control access to ChatGPT or any other form of AI? Should you stop people from using this as a source of information as they're doing their jobs? Should you allow a data steward to use Bard or ChatGPT or Bing or pick one, doesn't matter? Should you allow them to do that in the case of data verification, data validation, right? I'm a data steward and I want to make sure that my record for Acme Incorporated is correct. What does that mean from a policy perspective, right? The kind of the prevailing thought when it comes to data quality is, and I think this is the correct one, by the way, is don't assume it's correct. And you should probably assume that what you're getting back from ChatGPT is likely incorrect. And if so, is that actually making things harder, right? Is that actually prolonging a data quality task? If you've been tasked to verify, information for Acme Incorporated, do you have to add in additional data quality checks if you're using ChatGPT? So is that kind of negating the value in the first place? So all of this stuff is just kind of swirling around, and companies are like, what do we do? And what I heard, frankly, often from a lot of companies, and I'm talking pretty big ones, where they've just turned it off. They've just said, I'll stop. Stop. We need to figure it out. So, that's not the norm, but it's certainly, and I would say I was hearing that more in Europe than I was here in the US. And I think that's kind of natural, right?
Yeah, certainly where the privacy concerns and enforcement are a bit ahead of the curve. And I think that's kind of natural. It's a little normal. There's a little more conservatism there. Government plays a stronger role there, particularly the EU, in terms of privacy and access when it comes to these types of things. So I think it's a little bit, it's natural. So that's right. For some of the for companies to be like, whoa, time out on AI. But that was certainly, a dominant source of discussion. One of the things that I found. Go ahead. All the kind of concerns you described, like those seem, very, very valid, right? I mean, is this giving me accurate information? Is there going to be a hallucination? How do we think about guardrails? But I think when you and I talked earlier this week, like beyond that, we're kind of getting into a bit of kind of wild fear, uncertainty, doubt, like kind of what you'd call kind of irrational concerns about AI. Are you hearing that too? Or is it all do with caution kind of reasonably?
Everything.
Yeah.
You name it. By the way, looking at the comments, I've just figured it out. Stuart, my nephew went to school in Kingston upon Thames. So it's actually one more rail stop after Richmond. Richmond is still, I think you can still do Richmond on the tube. I think. I don't think it's National Rail. I think you can get to Richmond off a tube, but it's Kingston, one more. Or maybe I'm thinking about where he lives. He lives in this little place called Surbiton. Anyway, I'm babbling. Hey, Natalie, 2 from Toronto today. Fantastic. If you would have caught my previous episodes of CDO Matters Live, you would have heard me opining and cheering on for my beloved Edmonton Oilers to try to actually finally do something once and for all in the NHL playoffs. And I would have taken the Leafs, actually. I was, any team from Canada, but of course, sad. Las Vegas wins the Stanley Cup. Go figure. But yeah, back to the AI thing. There's, I don't know if I'd call it irrational, because in a world where there's so little that we've figured out, I don't think even what you could potentially consider an irrational field actually is, particularly for certain use cases. So there's a lot we need to figure out as a data and analytics community. What I think is going to happen is there will be kind of a mad rush for both vendors, particularly vendors, but for vendors and then for data and analytics leaders to be able to kind of check a box to say, yep, we've figured out a way to leverage some of the insight, some of the value here in a relatively non-obtrusive, a relatively compliant, a relatively non-destructive way, right? So companies will be able to say, CIOs will be able to go back to their boards and say, yep, we're doing it. Yes, we have a plan. And yes, we are leveraging these insights, and we're figuring it out. Same is true with vendors, by the way. I think vendors will the box will be checked. And then there's going to be a period, I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't think it'll ever stop, but where companies and vendors and everybody just and best practices, folks like me and experts like me, where we just kind of step back and say, okay, now we need to figure all of this stuff out, because things are moving really, 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 really quickly here. To an issue like ethics, we can all agree that these systems need to be ethical, right? That we need to eliminate bias. That's a great example. But to do it, these systems are computer programs. I sounded really old when I said that. It's software, right? These things run on rules, right? They run on rules. They don't run on gut. They don't run on intuition. They run on rules. So how do you codify ethics? How do you codify and measure ethical behavior? This is something that a number of folks I know are looking at. One of my peers on LinkedIn, an esteemed gentleman named Bill Schmarzo, I know is looking at this, and others are kind of looking at this. But the idea of even just quantifying these things, which I think is going to be necessary, just that in and of itself, how do you measure like ethics? That's a head spinner to me. I don't know the answer to that. In my world, a little bit more kind of concrete examples potentially would be data quality, right? Right now, for a lot of organizations, data quality is very loosely defined, right? You may have some high level policies. You may have some policies around data definitions, maybe even data accuracy. But ultimately, if humans are deciding a lot of these accuracy issues, I gave the example before of validating a record for Acme Incorporated. A lot of this is intuition, right? We're at the end of the day, when humans are applying the intuition instead of computers applying the intuition. So I need to figure out how to turn off my my screensaver.
Yeah, maybe irrational concern wasn't the right way to say it earlier. I think it was just a bit of conflation, right? Where people kind of assume everything. If I'm trying to incorporate AI into my business or my approach to data management, well, that's OpenAI, and that's only OpenAI. And we've kind of shared a few articles back and forth where I think people are saying, I'm not going to use Microsoft Fabric or Office Copilot or Azure OpenAI service because it's going to throw all of my proprietary information on ChatGPT and everybody can access it, which is not true.
No,
so
not necessarily.
The conflation and kind of crazy concern out there.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, if my video just froze for a second, it's because my screensaver cut in for whatever reason. Well, it's just because I'm so enthralled with the conversation. I'm not moving my mouse or typing anything. But to your comments, yeah, one of the things that I heard repeatedly on the road is people drawing synonyms between ChatGPT and AI,
Yes.
and that like conversations around things like hallucinations, where I was having conversations with people and they were just saying, well, these hallucinations are very, very real and they're not going away, so we should never use AI. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, large language models are one aspect of AI, right? Which,
Right.
it's AI, it's machine learning, it's neural networks, it's deep learning, it's LLMs. So there's different forms of AI. There's different forms of even training. Yes, building models is a time consuming and compute intense and very expensive proposition. Like to build the model for ChatGPT cost an awful lot of money. But
Right.
I suspect very soon that we will, and this is the tie back to the fabric, by the way. If anybody's out there and has not heard my any of my perspectives on the data fabric, I think it may be potentially useful. You may want to double back on a CDO Matters podcast where I call it data fabric demystified, because there actually is a tie back here. Data fabrics are architectural constructs where data itself informs its classification and use. So data fabrics are not just about infrastructure. They're not just about integration. They're not just about data virtualization, but they're also about a world where data informs its classification and use. So you could envision a world where if you had all of your data, whether it was log data, transactions data, data coming out of CRM, ERP systems, you name it, every nugget of data out there. And let's say you modeled a successful business process, right? Let you take quote to cash, or maybe even something simpler like a successful credit check for a new
Right.
customer who wanted credit. You could model those processes easily. I'm air quoting easily. But these are known processes. It's not like modeling human language,
Right.
right? Where like there's so much variability in language, and trying to figure out what the next word is a massive lift, which we have figured out. But imagine if you could model out some of these workflows and some of these processes, you could pretty quickly understand, and you worked backwards from success. Right. If you work backwards from a successful invoice being set, or a successful credit check, or a successful goods got sent successfully and they were received intact and successfully,
The
you
right
could
address.
model those processes and what they look like, and you could know when the data is correct and when it's not. Right. Like you would know pretty quickly when data was fit for purpose and when data was not fit for purpose. So I believe that there's a world where AI is being used to build and manage policies for data quality, where AI is being used to inform data integration patterns, where AI is being used to inform what is master data and what isn't master data, and what some of the policies are around that. I think it's very easy to conceptualize this world, and the idea that ChatGPT is the model that you would apply for quote to cash, for example. No, you don't. First of all, you don't need that. The model would be specifically focused on that business process. I think you're going to start seeing this in CRM applications very, very soon, and marketing applications very, very soon, where maybe, just maybe, and this is a little heretical here, maybe garbage in, garbage out is not as relevant. Sorry, not enough coffee today. Relevant as it used to be. Because somehow, some way, today, right now, business processes work, right? Invoices get sent, credit checks get done, goods get delivered, customers are happy, even with a lot of garbage in. And I suspect that there's a world where AI will know if one system says account and the other system says customer and the other one says profile, and if the transactions were all successful, it could all easily say, maybe even using things like knowledge graphs and other tools like this, to say these things are all largely the same and they're all associated with successful transactions. So why are we getting so hung up that the fact that one of these records says is associated to customer and the other one is associated to account?
Right.
for example. So had a lot of these discussions around AI, had a lot of discussions around the data fabric. I'm a believer in the data fabric. I've recently, a recent convert, by the way, 6 months ago, I didn't believe in it, or I was hesitant. I was fabric questioning. I was
Well, I thought
fabric
it was further
reluctant.
away. It's 5 years away, and now it's
Right. And it's because of all this AI stuff. It's like now I can envision a world 5 months ago, 6 months ago, I couldn't envision a world where these systems would be smart enough to model their own data, to create and manage their own governance policies, to enforce their own governance policies, or maybe to correct midstream, mid-transactions in operational workflows to correct for data inaccuracies or data inconsistencies. But I can see it now. Somehow, some way, OpenAI has figured out a way to model human language using the internet. And the internet is not necessarily known for the quality of the human language, or the English language, I should say. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but
well, no, this is something we hear a lot. And yeah, AI and OpenAI, these are huge topics we're hearing about.
yeah. Oh, I see some questions from Stuart regarding AI, particularly current OpenAI. And we're seeing a bit of a blend of fear of missing the FOMO for sure. There's a lot of FOMO out there. As a result of current hype, you mentioned particularly the UK and Europe, given strong regulatory and ethical concerns, lack of explainability and many explainability. Oh my goodness. That's so huge. The first time I ever implemented an MDM solution, it was a massive failure. And for a lot of reasons. But one of the bigger reasons why it was a massive failure is I couldn't explain to my users why they were seeing what they were seeing. And that's just with MDM, right? Where I had built some what we call, survivorship rules, right? Like the rules for creating a gold master record. If it comes from this system, then pick this field. If you do this, and a bunch of if-thens. And I created a gold master record, and I thought it was like the Mona Lisa of gold master records. Right. And then we ran the MDM processes, and we started to push the data into the CRM systems. And there was just like this chaos in the sales organization, because there's like, what is this? Why am I seeing this? What am I looking at? And I couldn't explain it, not in a way that was relevant to those business users. Right. And this is a use case where I actually had documented rules.
Right.
They were a little overly complex. I certainly over-engineered it. And what I ended up doing, the joke I tell is I created Franken-record. I created a gold master record that could not exist in real space or time, because I commingled build twos and ship twos, and I just did all this dumb stuff. But that's one example where I couldn't explain it. And like, how are you as a data leader? Let's say that you're using ChatGPT for data verification, right? And all of a sudden, yesterday in your CRM, they see Acme Incorporated at 123 Elm Way, and tomorrow they see Acme Incorporated at 123 Maple Way, right? And then somebody asks you, well, wait a minute, I'm trying to issue a purchase order against Acme Incorporated, and they're not at Maple Way, right? I know they're at Elm Way. Why are you telling me Maple Way? Why? And then the answer is, well, ChatGPT told me so.
Right.
Oh, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be having that conversation. But I think that's a really kind of pedantic example of it. I think there could be far more complex examples where AI is being used to make really tough decisions. Like, I mean, there were issues in the news, a couple of years ago about using AI for assigning credit, right? And some of the decisions that were being made that were just not fair, right? And companies couldn't explain it. So Stuart, couldn't agree more. That's one example of, we got to figure this stuff out. I don't have any magic answers. Ethics in AI is undoubtedly one of the more important areas for sure. Ethics in AI. Yeah. So just want to make sure that I got to Stuart's questions and comments there, because I think it's bang on. So.
Yeah. I see Rob mentioned about arguments about freedom of speech for LLMs. I don't think I've seen anything specific to freedom of speech, but I've seen a lot of the libel and kind of slander side where, ChatGPT is telling people they were involved in, crimes or court cases that didn't exist, or they were a whistleblower or a defendant in a criminal case, and ChatGPT said they were the accused. And this is getting
it's so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, the list of like potential use cases here is just so long. Like, kind of one of the classic ones is the self-driving car, and the self-driving car making what is a completely, in theory, totally rational decision,
Hmm.
but still ended up being liable. Um, yeah, AI is a person. Like, does AI have free speech? I don't know. Like, you see a lot of right now, copyright is an interesting one for me. Copyright people have copyright, right? Like copyright is assigned to people. I own these words or these concepts or this story or this narrative, and you can't assign copyright to a machine, right? So if I copy and paste something created by OpenAI today, I can't be held liable for breaking the copyrights of OpenAI, because OpenAI can't own copyrights because it's a machine, it's not a person, right? So now there are other examples, like the Getty example, where Getty owned images, and then OpenAI
Right.
took those images and added a finger.
Right.
this one, this,
Generative
yeah,
AI.
this one makes me. It's like Dolly. I mean, if you play with Dolly, like, I mean, like, it's so amazing and so incredible, the technology, and yet they can't figure out how many fingers to put on a hand. Like, we haven't figured this out yet. Like, really? But anyway, the Getty Images case, where they were taking copyrighted images, and but the images still had the watermarks on them. It's like, come
Right.
on, like,
Pretty clear.
yeah. I'm like, how does Getty not take action on that? But the broader question here is, like, what are the incentives going to be for creation in the future, right? Like, maybe this is my ego bias at play, probably, because I
Mhm.
got one. We all do, but mine is rather large. When I do ChatGPT searches around like data governance, data quality, what's MDM, what are MDM best practices, what I see coming back to me, I swear I've written in the past. I swear I wrote a
Right.
Gartner. And again, that's maybe just kind of confirmation and ego bias. But like, what's
But
the incentive?
presumably
What's
that
that?
source content should have, is it presumably that source content should have been behind a gate or shouldn't have been somewhere on the public internet in
Well,
the
knock, knock.
ChatGPT
Yeah.
model. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
you said no explainability. Who knows where the stuff
Well,
came from?
yeah, exactly. But like, how would I even ever make a copyright claim against that? I never would, or I never could, or in
Good.
this case, Gartner. But yeah, what are the incentives going to be to create in the future? Right? If everything that you do, this get back to your point about of OpenAI and Microsoft, and like everything going out into the public internet. Like,
Mhm.
if you're using the public version of ChatGPT, right, or Bard, or any of these, then yeah, like your data is going to be part of the future training set. There are ways to wall yourself off, and in the case of OpenAI running in Azure, you can create your own tenant. You can wall yourself
Right.
off, so that doesn't necessarily happen. There are ways around this. So, but again, what I hear out in the market, this is kind of some of the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and
Mhm.
doubt, is like there's just a natural assumption that if you're using any form around that. And now it looks like it's Ben's turn to maybe have his screensaver kick in. Did your
Oh,
screensaver kick
my
in, Ben?
freezing on your end.
Well, maybe I'm lost too.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple red bars on your network over there, Malcolm. So maybe
Are we
it's
having technical difficulties?
we'll
Seems
steer
like
through
I'm.
it.
All right. You're coming and going. Mine saying is my internet. My internet. I don't think so. All right. It only ever happens when we're recording live thing.
Yeah, Malcolm,
Hello?
maybe you could try turning your
Am I back?
camera on and off and seeing if that'll give it a break. But I can kind of cue us up.
It's saying there's my. Yeah, I think everything's okay. How am I? Everything okay now?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Everything okay now? Yeah, of course. there's only ever bandwidth problems. I was actually just testing this yesterday. I have 250 megs. So 40 up and 250 down. So, but of course, I'm getting warnings about low internet. So who knows? Do I sound okay now?
Yeah, I'm hearing you just fine.
All right. Looking at some of the comments from Rob. Lawsuits already started. Oh, Reuters. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. Just making sure that we get to any comments. By the way, folks, right? Like if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. Oh, there we go. Here's a question. Thank you. Can I explain the difference between data fabric and data mesh? Oh, yes, I can. So this week, I read the data mesh for the second time. And it's a thick read. There's a lot of contents there. It's a dense read. So yes. So there's a lot of differences between the data fabric and the data mesh. So they are both, I would argue they are both data management architectures. Data mesh says it's a socio-technical construct, meaning it's people, process, and technology. I think the data fabric would also kind of say the same thing, that it's people, process, and technology, but it's generally more of a technological architectural construct. That is the data fabric. One thing to keep in mind about the data mesh, it is purely an analytical paradigm. And anybody tells you that it is not, it's operational, it is not. The first paragraphs of Zhamak's book says that it's an analytical construct. Shameless plug, by the way. I'll be interviewing Zhamak very shortly for the CDO Matters podcast, which will probably come out in about a month from now. We actually had a recording scheduled last week and she got sick. So we will have Zhamak coming up, who wrote the book. She's the Zhamak Dagani, who's the author of Data Mesh. We'll have her on the CDO Matters podcast here very, very shortly. But the data mesh is an analytical paradigm, right? The data mesh has kind of four core constructs to it. One is a kind of an underlying data management platform, some sort of software platform that kind of is the brain, as it were, for the data mesh. One is decentralization, right? Massive and total and complete decentralization. So even something like a data warehouse, the data mesh would say is what Zhamak calls an anti-pattern, right? So complete and total decentralization of the data. Another of the core operating constructs here is data products. And a data product to the data mesh is a very, very specific thing. It's not just a dashboard or report or an API sitting in a data catalog. It is something that is programmatic, is programmable, meaning it is actually highly autonomous with very, very specific data governance rules being applied to it, where those rules are being managed as part of a data contract for this data product, where you are provisioning and selling and provisioning data products in a highly automated way through some sort of data platform that is provisioning these products. So it's an analytical paradigm. It is highly decentralized, peer-to-peer, domain to domain, where you are building and managing your own products within a specific domain. The challenge for the data mesh, to me, the biggest challenge is a few different things. One is complexity, right? Centralized patterns of anything, hubs and spokes, exist for a reason, right? They exist for a reason because in many ways they can be far more effective than just peer-to-peer. If you're looking at it through the lens of more of a kind of a network paradigm, there are hubs and spokes because they're more efficient than spiderweb designs. But in essence, what the data mesh is a spiderweb design, right? Where domains are sharing reports or sharing insights or sharing data products across from domain to domain. But where the data mesh would say domain one could have a definition for customer that is completely different than a definition for customer two. Now, the data mesh would also say that there should be some form, a limited form of higher level, enterprise-wide cross-functional data governance. But that's really not really well defined in my mind in the data mesh book. The data mesh acknowledges there needs to be some sort of policies in place to allow data sharing from domain to domain. But again, to me, it's not really well defined. So a data mesh is an analytical paradigm. It's all about sharing analytical insights. It's about allowing domains to manage their own data. It's about finding ways to share, but that sharing is what to me is some of the weakest aspects of the data mesh. Not to mention the complexity, right? Like today.
Sure.
We have rules that exist on an enterprise-wide basis, and a lot of companies simply wrestle with having one set of rules, let alone 20 sets of rules from a domain to domain to domain to domain perspective. So data fabric is very different than this. Data fabric is analytical and operational. Data fabric is all about what Gartner would call active metadata, the activation of metadata, meaning the analysis, the application of graph and AI and other modern technologies to allow data to inform its own classification and use, where data could set its own governance policies. This is a future state mesh, future state fabric, by the way. So these are kind of two different things. I think they could complement each other. At the last Gartner conference, Gartner was talking about how data mesh and data fabric could coexist. I think they could, but you're talking about levels of complexity here that would, for either, today, by the way, for either data fabric or data mesh, 95% of the companies that I've talked to, and I've literally, guys, talked to hundreds, if not thousands. I was a Gartner analyst. I had 1,500 inquiries over three years, probably over 1,000 companies. I would say 95% of them lack the data and analytics governance maturity to do either a data mesh or a data fabric, at least insofar as the full expression of either of those architectures, the full expression of a data mesh, meaning all of it, right? The data management platform, highly decentralized peer-to-peer data products that are fully and completely automated, governance that is automated, data contracts, like all of that. I've yet to see that anywhere. People say they're doing a data mesh, and what they really mean is they bought a data catalog and they've exposed a few products in a catalog. It's not a data mesh. Sorry, I can ramble about the data mesh and the data fabric for hours. I was involved in the creation of some of the narrative around the data fabric at Gartner. So I wasn't the primary analyst who was driving that. There's a gentleman named Mark Beyer, who's a friend of mine. But I was certainly involved in doing a lot of peer review and providing input on research that kind of led to what we know of as the data fabric today.
Got it. I'm looking in the chat. I didn't see any other questions. I did have one other topic we can move on from OpenAI for a bit.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, you had on LinkedIn, I think it was earlier this week, you had a post that you kind of mentioned has gotten some attention about working with consultants. So working big, large scale projects, initiatives, and we've all heard of scope creep, right? And scope creep is a commonly identified concern and issue, but what are some of the most common causes of scope creep, and how does that seem to still get into every kind of consulting engagement today?
So first of all, to my consultant friends, of which I have many, I was a consultant for years, right? I paid my mortgage as a consultant. Not for a Deloitte or an Accenture, but for a small boutique consulting firm where I was out there hustling, doing my own biz dev, getting my own SOWs. I was selling consulting services and I was implementing consulting services. So I know this world, and consultants can play an incredibly valuable role in any data and analytics program. They can play an important role from a strategy definition perspective. They can play an important role from implementing software, getting software up and running. They can play an important role when it comes to augmenting staff and putting additional short-term resources against large-scale programs. Consultants can be incredibly valuable, and I'm a believer. I've hired more consultants than I could probably remember in my lifetime, and I'm a fan. However, consultants need to be managed, right? And the best way to make sure that you have a fruitful interaction with a consultant that is a win-win for both you and the consultant is to make sure that you put what I would describe as a box around a consultant, meaning you define the high-level outcomes that you want from SOWs. What's SOWs? Something of work, statement of work. That you define the parameters of the SOW. The best thing that you can do before you engage a consultant is have some idea of what success looks like, and some idea of how to measure that success in very tangible, quantifiable ways. For example, I want to reduce my supplier spends by 5% by reducing the amount of inventory that we have, or the inventory that goes bad. Maybe you have perishable goods that you're managing, and some of it goes bad because your ordering processes are inefficient, right? But have some idea of what success looks like, and use those successes use them to establish some boundaries, and to be very, very limited in your scope, right? And to say, these are the outcomes that I want to drive. So instead of saying, fix my procurement process, right? That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is do what I just said. Lower my inventory holding cost by 5% by reducing the amount of goods that go bad in our possession, right? Like, I haven't worked in the grocery or retail world, but maybe something sounds something very similar to that, right? Go to that end of the spectrum and be very, very specific about what some of the deliverables will be. Be very specific on the outcomes of the SOW. Have an SOW that is driven by business outcomes, and not some kind of loosey-goosey, just go solve it for me.
Right.
And I understand that if you are a data leader and you sign an SOW that is poorly defined, that doesn't have any defined outcomes, that doesn't have any defined deliverables or high-level milestones or anything else like that. This is kind of typically what a classic phase one consulting agreement would look like, where you hire consultants to go figure out what your scope will be, to figure out what your requirements will be, to figure out what all the dependencies are, and to build the milestones, build the roadmap. That was kind of what I was the main post was to say, hey, listen, don't let consultants just run amok and do that stuff. Don't let consultants define your requirements for you. Don't let consultants define your success criteria for you. You need to do that before you engage consultants, which to me sounded like just a completely normal, reasonable, rational thing. And it seemed like on LinkedIn, I hit a little bit of a nerve. And I think it's because there's so many consultants on LinkedIn, and it's not a bad thing, guys. You know, I heard a lot of comments, which were true, by the way, which is, hey, this is a partnership. It's two-way street. I'm paraphrasing now, by the way. This is kind of a two-way street, and CDOs and, data and analytics leaders need to be specific, and they need to know, how to manage these engagements. They need to know the differences between the different kind of consultant types that I was talking about earlier. And it falls to them to make sure that they are being very specific in the definition of their needs. Those things are true. But I guess really what I was going for is, if you get into a consulting agreement and there's a consultant that is okay with having a phase one SOW that has basically no definitions on it, and no guidelines, and no guideposts, and no milestones, red flag, massive red flag. Because I can't tell you how many times this happened over and over and over and over when I was at Gartner, when I would get on the phone with some CDO or somebody else, and they'd say, yeah, we're 8 months in to this phase one initiative for, some loosely defined goal of, hey, maybe we're implementing data products, right? Like we're going to implement a data product and products because I've heard that that's the thing that we need to do, and I've hired some consultants to do it. And we're 8 months in, and we burned through all the money on a phase one engagement, what a consultant would call time and materials, right? Where the engagement is not bound by specific deliverables or specific outcomes. It's just, hey, we'll keep working until June, because that's when the money will run out. And by June, we expect we'll have some well-defined requirements that we can use to go into a phase two SOW to have a fixed price bid in the next engagement. But I heard over and over again, we're like 3/4 of the way through, we're burning through the money left, right, and center, and we have nothing to show for it. I heard that all the time. And that CDO is being asked by a CFO or a CEO, hey, why are we spending all this money? What's this going to deliver? I'm hearing bad things. The consultants are just burning through all the money, and what's the plan?
Right.
So that was kind of the motivation for my post, which was, there are ways to do this the right way, right? There are ways to make sure you limit your risk from having these runaway consulting agreements that burn through tons of money that don't provide any value. Because often what ends up happening in those situations is 3/4 of the money will be burnt through, and CEOs or CDOs or CFOs will just get frustrated and they'll give up, and they'll cancel the contract and they'll walk away, and then they'll start all over again. Right. Seen it happen over and over. So that was the kind of the motivation behind the post. But it just seemed like, I think a lot of consultants out there thought that I was being negative on consultants. I'm not. I'm just finding a way. What this is really about is to find a way to create a win-win situation to make sure that the customer gets value and the consultant is seen as a hero. Because the last thing as a consultant that you want is to be seen as the person who has poorly defined SOWs, that is just out there to burn through, is to suck up as much cash from their clients as possible and to create these endless, gigantic programs that have ill-defined scopes that go on forever. You don't want to be considered that consultant. You don't want to be that consultant. So I think there is absolutely a win-win here.
Yeah, just saying it ultimately comes on to you as the data leader, right? To define those scopes, own the process on the project, and don't get into a situation where.
Yeah, but where you're like 8 months in and you don't have any value to show. But the fact is, what I'm seeing out there, and this is borne out by the fact that CDO tenures are half of CIOs, is that there's a lot of people in CDO roles who are new to data, and as I don't know what the word is, but as odd as that may be, I see it all the time, particularly in the government sector, because so many city, county, state, federal agencies have all actually mandated that CDOs get put into place. So you often, with a lot of these like state agencies, you have these new CDOs that have pretty big mandates and who've really kind of never been in a data leadership role before. And what's the first thing they do? Well, I need some subject matter experts. Makes sense, right? I need to talk to people who know this world because I really don't, because my state has been underfunding this for years and years and years, right? And my team is too small, and I've got very limited number of people who on my team who know this stuff, because again, it's being underfunded and ignored for years and years. So they go to consultants. It's natural, and it's those folks, I think, that are probably the most, for lack of a better word, vulnerable to these types of relationships. In the federal space, I saw this all the time, particularly defense. Conversation for a separate day. But where you're a CDO of, whatever, insert large defense agency here, or a department within a department within a department. Yeah, it's a real challenge. But anyway, there are situations, there are ways to manage consultants. There are ways to make sure that you have win-win solutions or situations coming out of consulting agreements. All right, Ron, thanks for coming out. If you're still on.
So Malcolm, you touched on this a bit earlier. Data products is something you touched on earlier, and we you and I working in MDM, we hear a lot about data products, and talking about golden records, and you kind of mentioned your Franken record.
Franken record, yep.
Issue with the early MDM implementation. Just talk a bit about that concept, and like, is golden record and kind of a single source of truth, is that becoming a bit more outdated in favor of kind of what you're talking about, data products, or what was kind of what were you kind of saying with that?
There's two separate things there. One is there's two things buried in your question. One is the notion of a single gold master record kind of outdated? Short answer, yes. Which I know is heretical in the MDM space, because we're about the gold master record. But the story that I tell, well, it's not a story. This I think could be mathematically quantified, and a mathematical proof applied to this, is that truth is contextually bound, right? And we've all, in the data and analytics space, we've always known this, right? Truth to marketers is different than truth to people in finance or compliance or audit, right? You can have two truths in an organization, because it's not about truth. It's about fit for purpose. It's about successful transactions. It's about getting jobs done. I think this is in one way, the use of the word truth here is kind of not serving data and analytics people, because truth for so many people is concrete. It's deterministic. It is or it isn't. It's this binary. It's true or it's not true. True, false. Yes, no. Red, blue. And for a lot of people, it is this deterministic notion, when in reality, it's actually kind of not. right? So the idea of one record to rule them all is probably not, is most certainly not practical. Now, however, just as there is a sales and marketing context or a finance context, there is also an enterprise-wide context, right? And there needs to be a single version of truth for that context. Because if your CEO asks how many customers do we have, there can only be one answer. So this is something that we at Prophecy are increasingly calling adaptive MDM. Gartner was calling it this adaptive data governance years ago. The idea of being adaptive and being able to adapt to a specific context and have an answer for sales and marketing that is different than an answer for finance, whether that is an MDM use case or even an analytics use case, right? To be adaptive and to be able to allow context to rule. So that was the second half of your question of, gold master records and how does this relate to back to the first half of your question, which was data products. Now, I think that far too many people in the data and analytics space are focusing on data products as an output, because this is what we do, right? We make reports, we make dashboards, we make gold master records, right? We make output of things. We output stuff, right? We run them through our grinder, our data pipelines, our transformation processes, our data quality processes, but we make these outputs. And here's a data product. Okay. Well, I would argue that it's really not about the data product, right? Because just simply putting a dashboard or making a schema or a table or a field or a record or an API accessible through a data catalog and then slapping some permissions on it, slapping some access on it. Okay, so you could have a storefront, which is the data catalog. You can have a place to go and do self-service access to that product. That's fine. That's good. And there's some value there, but it's certainly not transformational, right? Like I don't view that as being transformational to an organization to be able to access, a list of dashboards, right? It's good, but it's better than nothing. But what I would argue is that we need to focus away from the output and data product as an output, data product as a thing, to the process, which is, to me, if you're making products, that means the process is product management. And this is a world that we're just not talking about in data and analytics. We're not talking about product management. And do we as data leaders need to embrace more product management disciplines within data and analytics? Short answer to me is yes, yes, yes. We absolutely do. And to me, that's where the transformation can happen. And this is probably a subject of a separate blog or maybe even a separate podcast or at least an hour-long conversation about what's different between what we've always done and just putting some dashboards in a catalog and calling it a product. What's different than product management applied to data and analytics? And I think that there are massive fundamental differences, but I'll highlight a few. One is, if you're a product manager, right, you are obsessed with customer needs, customer experience, design, UX, right? You are obsessed with understanding customer needs and the market, right? You are focused on efficiency of the process. You're even focused on things like pricing and what will the market want from a price perspective. The flip side of the price coin is value on the top, price underside of that coin is cost. Right? The delta between the two is margin, it's profit. But we as data and analytics leaders need to start understanding cost. We need to understand how much does it cost to provision what we're doing and how much would people actually pay for it? What's the value that they are getting from this product? So the list of ways that product management could be different than what we're doing day in and day out is incredibly, extremely long. But I would argue at a high level, if you take product management as an approach and apply it to data and analytics, you will have far more customer centricity than you've ever had before. Instead of data driven, you would actually be customer driven. Hopefully that makes sense. So product management, I'm 2 thumbs up on product management. Data products, meh. I mean, okay. But the data products that I see are what I described, like stuff being exposed in a catalog. Even people who are saying I'm doing a data mesh. And then I ask, okay, well, what does that look like to you? What does that mean? Oh, we're doing data products. Oh, okay, great. Tell me more. Well, we've bought a catalog and we're exposing some stuff in a catalog. That's what the answer is typically been. And when it comes to the data mesh, like what I just described is like 1/10 of what a data product really should, quote, quote, should be, at least through the lens of a data mesh, right? A data product in a data mesh is domain driven. It is automated. The governance rules are automated. There's a data contract associated to it, and on and on and on. So the automated governance is something that Zhamak calls federated computational governance, which is where it's automated. It's automatic. So anyway, yeah, I'm a believer in product management, but data products, to me, it's marketing.
A new name on an existing thing.
Exactly.
Well, I think that it puts us at the top of the hour. We are just out of time. I think we covered a lot, Malcolm. We covered everything, OpenAI, the concerns about that, data products, all of that. So thanks, everybody, for taking the time to listen to us today and for the participation in the audience especially. But check us out next month. Check out the CDO Matters podcast in the coming weeks, especially the interview with Zhamak coming up.
Yep.
And we will see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody. Happy 4th.
Thanks.